My high school boyfriend is a psycho, and when wild rumors get out about me and a hot teacher, he attacks him and ends up in jail. It was the beginning of my senior year in high school when I started falling in love with Mr. Owens, my 12th grade English teacher. It's spring break now, but if you had been there, and if you had been me, at that time and place, you would have done exactly the same thing. Because there's just something about Mr. Owens, you see. Ever since he first started working at Juilliard Academy my junior year, I knew my fate was bound to his. But I had no idea it would be in such an insane way. A way that changed the trajectory of both our lives, and the life of my boyfriend Chuck, who's now sitting in a jail cell facing felony charges of assault. I started writing for the school paper halfway through my junior year, which meant I'd be working in close proximity with Mr. Owens. He recognized my talent right away, and tried his best to foster it. But he did that with all of his students, and he didn't start out showing me any more attention than any of them. But things sort of changed at the beginning of this year when I started taking his class. Finally having Mr. Owens as a teacher was everything I dreamed of, but there was a big problem. People were beginning to talk about us. I sometimes stayed after class to get feedback from him on my short stories, and naturally a bunch of gossipy teenagers did their thing and started a bunch of scandalous rumors because of it. And while that was bad enough, the fact that I was dating a guy with a serious temper wasn't helping things. I've been dating Chuck since homecoming. We were sort of friends and I guess I kind of had a thing for him, but honestly I just felt like I should have a boyfriend my senior year. I realized that's shallow, but if I knew then what I know now, I obviously would never have said yes to his offer. It's not like we had a very good time at the dance anyway. He seemed more interested in hanging out with his football buddies than me, and ended up puking from the straight whiskey they were all passing back and forth all night. But as the year went on, Chuck definitely grew very attached to me. And when the rumors about Mr. Owens and I finally reached him, he went totally ballistic. Chuck always had a temper, which definitely helped him out on the football field, but it led to a lot of fights in the hallways of the school. And the troubled relationship he had with his father helped fuel the fire. In a way I felt sorry for him, but that was hard to do when he stormed into Mr. Owens' classroom in the middle of a lecture and started screaming at him to stay away from his girlfriend or else. Chuck had obviously picked the period I had English with Mr. Owens pulled his little stunt. There was no way that could have been a coincidence. And all I did was sit there with my head in my hands while everybody looked at me, trying to disappear completely. Some other students physically removed Chuck from the room, but the damage was done. He was suspended for a week and Mr. Owens and I had to give sworn statements to the school saying that we weren't carrying on a relationship. It was a total indignity, and totally unfair to Mr. Owens. Because while I was and still am hopelessly in love with him, he's never shown any interest back. Of course this is a good thing, and all the more reason to admire him, but also all the more reason to be insulted by him. How could the school think he would be capable of that? Although I guess these days, nothing shocking. Nevertheless, it did nothing to quiet the rumors of some relationship between us, even though our short story sessions were now officially banned. The administration told us that under no uncertain terms could I stay after class or be alone with Mr. Owens. It was totally unfair. Why should my work have to suffer just because Chuck is a psycho with anger issues? But they said there wouldn't even be a scent of something going on between them. We could work on the school paper together, but that was it. Thankfully my parents believed me, but the cat was out of the bag. The entire thing was the talk of the school. But then Chuck got back from his suspension, and little did we know it would only get worse from there. I didn't break up with him after the whole yelling incident. How could I? That timing would be more than a little suspicious, don't you think? For appearance's sake, I had to keep going out with him for at least a little while longer. That meant that I had to be seen with him, which was the last thing in the world that I actually wanted to do. I tried my best to fake it, but I just couldn't hide my disgust for him, and it drove him crazy. He could tell that his outburst pushed me away for good, and that it was only a matter of time before I dumped him. After a basketball game one night, we were both sitting in his car talking. The parking lot had pretty much cleared out and we were the only ones there. Everything was going fine until the topic of graduation came up. He said that I was only biding my time until then so I could dump him, and as soon as he said it, I realized it was true. I'm not a very good liar, and when people ask me a direct question that I feel I should lie about, I just go silent. That unfortunately happened this time, which to Chuck proved his point. He punched the steering wheel, causing it to honk, and then told me to get out of his car. I finally decided that I didn't want anything to do with this guy ever again and did exactly what he asked and got out of the car, but so did he. He started following me on my own, yelling all the way about how I was a cheater and a hoe. When I finally got to my car he was totally in my face, and I was already reaching for the pepper spray on my keychain that my dad gave me for just these situations. But I didn't even get a chance before I saw Chuck's fist raise high in the air. It was like it was all happening in slow motion. I couldn't believe it, but Chuck was about to hit me. At least he was going to. Suddenly I heard footsteps quickly approaching on the right, and then in a flash someone tackled Chuck right into the side of my car, smashing the back window and sending them both crumbling to the ground. I couldn't believe it. It was Mr. Owens. He got up and dusted the broken glass from his hair. "Are you okay?" he asked, panting heavy breaths. I told him I was, but I wasn't so sure about Chuck. He was down on the ground half conscious and moaning, blood coming from his busted lip. "He was going to hit you, right?" "Yes," I said, my hands shaking. "I think so." I asked him where he came from and he said he'd been out sweeping the trash from the parking lot. Teachers volunteered for the job and this was his week. I didn't see him at all, but then again I guess I was busy being yelled at or chased. We both tried to help Chuck up, but he nearly hit us trying to get us away. After a few minutes he finally managed to stand up and start stumbling toward his car. Halfway there he stopped and turned, and pointed his finger directly at Mr. Owens. "I'll get you for this, Owens," he said. "You better watch your back." He got in his car and peeled off, and Mr. Owens turned to me and asked me if I was okay. I really wasn't, but of course told him I was. Beyond the fact that he'd just tackled a student, I had a problem of my own. Now that Chuck had driven off with the car, I had no ride home. But considering Mr. Owens and I weren't allowed to be alone, he couldn't take me home either. But we both decided to ignore the rules, and he gave me a ride. I don't think anyone saw us, but there are cameras in the parking lot. If Chuck tries anything, all of this will be investigated, and we'll all be screwed. I wish the truth was enough for people, but it's obviously not. They want to believe the most scandalous story imaginable regardless of the cost to innocent people like Mr. Owens. And now I don't know what to do. It's officially spring break and I haven't talked to Chuck since this happened last Friday night. He's not responding to my texts, and I have a feeling he's just getting angrier and angrier, and plotting some truly terrible things for the best teacher that I've ever had. So what should I do? Tell someone and risk Mr. Owens' job and our reputations? Or protect us by getting Chuck as far away as possible? Please help. Update 1. Thanks to everyone for all of the suggestions. I know this is obviously a controversial topic, and some of you are more respectful than others. I don't know why some people insist on blaming me for any of this, but I guess that's the internet for you. The first day back from spring break was terrifying. I had a study hall with Chuck first period, and when I saw his desk empty, I knew he'd either slept in, which was not unusual, or something serious was going on. The rest of the morning was quiet. Just a boring Monday, everyone talking about what they did on spring break and how lame it was that we were back in school. There wasn't any gossip or talk of what happened in the parking lot, no mention of the whole Mr. Owens scandal at all actually. I was hoping that maybe after a few months of obsession, the school had moved on to other scandals. But then I was surprised to see that we had a substitute for Mr. Owens' class. I don't think I can recall him never missing a day, and for it to be the first day after spring break was even stranger. And then at lunch I started hearing whispers of something serious that went down. Something involving Mr. Owens and Chuck. The stories were vague and no one knew much, but there was a rumor that Chuck had waited for Mr. Owens to arrive for school that morning and then attacked him in the parking lot. It seems insane to me at the moment, but then again, totally on brand for where Chuck's mind was heading. And as I began to catch those familiar suspicious stares in the hallway, I simply couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave. And that's exactly what I did. I went home and walked right past my mother and straight into my bedroom. She tried to get me to talk about whatever was bothering me, but there was no way I was going to talk about it. Maybe I should finally just come clean at that point and talk to her about the whole thing. Who was I protecting anyway? I guess I just have a hard time opening up about my feelings, but I just went to sleep and didn't wake up until morning. I didn't want to go to school. My stomach was in knots and I felt like I might be sick. But I figured if something really had happened between Mr. Owens and Chuck, me not showing up wouldn't look so good. But to tell you the truth, I wish I'd just stayed home. As soon as I walked in the school, everyone was staring at me like I was some sort of freak. Multiple people asked me why I even bothered to come to school today, and when I saw the principals and staff waiting for me, I finally realized why. As I walked into the principal's office, I was shocked to see my mom and dad sitting there in front of his desk, with concerned and frightened expressions on their faces. I was told to take a seat between them, and I immediately felt the sweat on my forehead begin to form. It was then explained to me that the rumors were true. Chuck had in fact assaulted Mr. Owens as he was walking into the school, and now Mr. Owens is in the hospital and Chuck is on the run. I felt hot tears form in my eyes and stream down my face. They asked if I knew anything about what had happened or why, and I told them that no, Mr. Owens and I had continued to obey the agreement about not being alone together. I said that Chuck must have been acting alone based on some crazy ideas of jealousy, and that Mr. Owens was an innocent victim in all this. The principal and the others looked at me suspiciously and my parents shifted nervously in their chairs. I realized that something else was going on. They were hiding something from me. The principal then turned his computer monitor towards me and asked me to explain the video I saw. It was me getting into Mr. Owens' car that night after he tackled Chuck. I told them that he was merely giving me a ride because of what happened before, which they said they were well aware of. The principal rewound the video to Chuck raising his fist at me and then Mr. Owens' NFL-worthy tackle. He pointed out the damage to my vehicle, and then asked if he could take a look. It was then that my dad finally spoke up. "You told me somebody backed into you. You lied to me." It was true, I lied to my dad. I told him that some big truck had backed into my car in a parking lot, and that's what caused the damage to the side, not Chuck's body. All I could do was try to tell them the truth and hope that they believed me, and the truth was that nothing was going on between Mr. Owens and I, but now Chuck is out there on the loose, and Mr. Owens is in the hospital with multiple broken bones. Update 2. I guess there's only so many places a high school senior who's not very bright in the first place can go to hide out from the police. And Chuck was definitely not very bright. He nearly got kicked off the football team because his grades were so low. The cops found him about 6 hours later, hiding out in his car at a highway rest stop. He apparently cried as they dragged him out and put him in the back of the police cruiser. He was arrested for felony assault, and considering he just turned 18 a few months ago, will be tried as an adult. I was eventually able to convince the administration, one by one, that this has all just been a massive misunderstanding from the start. I guess with my parents there supporting me and holding my hand, they found me a little more serious. Of course, Chuck's horrible reputation didn't do him any favors, and no one was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. That doesn't really reflect well on me, considering how long I dated him, but what can I say at this point? But still, the damage to everyone was done. Mr. Owens is still in the hospital, but he should be getting out today. I'm honestly terrified to see him, but I don't think I'll have to. At least not at school anyway. By the time he'd be hell up enough to return, it would be the next school year. But I highly doubt he'll be returning after all of this. Unless he's really passionate about teaching at Juilliard Academy, which after everything they put him through, I don't see how that's possible. Poor Mr. Owens. All he wanted to do was teach kids about great literature, and because of his charm and good looks, ended up in the hospital and one of his students in jail. And the only thing he ever did wrong was try to help me with my short stories. So I guess you can say I really blame myself in the end. Despite it being Chuck's decision in the end to cause all of this mayhem and violence, it should have known that would be his reaction. And yeah, I went to Mr. Owens for his help with my stories, but I of course have some ulterior motives of my own. Not that I thought the two of us were getting married, but I just liked being around him, and wanted to hear his insights on my work before I graduated. I guess I'm doing my own sort of blaming the victim, and that victim is me. My parents have been so awesome, and my mom is the one who keeps telling me that it was Chuck and Chuck alone who made this a big deal, along with all of the gossipy kids in my high school. I try to tell myself that, but I just don't know. I'm thinking about finishing my classes online for the rest of the year and then being done with this place forever. I'm sure years from now everything will look different. Who knows, maybe Mr. Owens and I will even meet again.